morning and welcome back to the CDS VOD review nonsense. This week we fought Tempo. And if you're concerned, hey Spidz, where's that edited thing? I really liked that last time. It's going to be after the slides, I think, unless you've already seen it. I haven't decided if it's going before the slides or after, but it'll be after the slides if you just want to see that because, you know, flashing images make your brain go happy. Demon Diff, or Tempo, had Misfortune, Azir, Swain, Shyvana, LeBlanc, Kalista, Yuumi, Ashe, Aurelia, Nautilus, and I, like always, have Gwen, Na, Pantheon, Varus, Alawi, Fiora, Darius, Thresh, Shen, and Taric. If you look at their decks, just like last week, it's pretty obvious what sort of pairings they've got. They've got 3 and 4. They've got 4 really obvious pairings. They've got Ashe LeBlanc, which is a deck. They've got Azir Aurelia, which is a deck, and MF Swain, which is a deck. They've also got Naut SI, which I think they can make a pretty good deep deck if they just use Kalista in Nautilus. And Shyvana Yuumi can work as a big mid-range deck, right? But the most real of all of those decks, if you're discounting Nautilus SI for some reason, is Azir Aurelia, MF Swain, and Ashe LeBlanc. Last week they were fighting Absolution. I don't know if this lineup's particularly good into Absolution. I don't know. But I thought they might be bringing it again this week. Now, the other options that I could see them bringing, if this wasn't their lineup, was a Shyvana, Yuumi, Deep, and Ashe LeBlanc. This would be an anti-mid-range lineup, which if you see my champions, right, they're all mid-range champions, basically. I could see a world where they combine the Swain and the LeBlanc to make 2 flock decks, and then a 3rd deck. And I could see a world where they replace Ashe LeBlanc with Kalista LeBlanc Fearsome Aggro, right? It's just Kalista Fearsome Aggro and then you run LeBlanc because it's probably your best aggressive champ. Maybe you would run something else, but that's what I expected if they weren't going to bring this. But expecting Azir Aurelia, which I thought was pretty likely, I wanted to bring 3 heavy Azir targeting decks. 3 decks that absolutely just like demolish Azir. Why am I turning the sound up? I don't have any sound on right now. That absolutely demolishes Azir. So, the first deck in this lineup was Na Darius in Bandle City. Na Darius Bandle City is just like, it looks a bit like an aggro deck, but you've got some tempo tools. Tempo tools is kind of funny to say against tempo mana. But you can pretty much see, like, based on the units, how the game plan is supposed to be. But what made this deck anti-Azir Aurelia even more so was supposed to be the spells. So, I wanted to go over these specifically. Sparring Student and Gringley Duo died at all of these. Think of Bandle Telstones as Electro Harpoon. These 11 cards demolish Sparring Student, Gringley Duo, Drop the Bomb and Bouncing Bomb and Bandle Telstones, as well as Group Shot, Beat Domination and Aurelia as well. And all of these cards, these are their only powerful cards that aren't champions, right? So the only 2 powerful cards that aren't listed right now are Azir and Darius. And so, if I can counter these while being aggressive with the Beard, Pigeon, Commando, you know, Maya stuff, Na as well, we find ourselves in a very favourable position. I just want to quickly note that the cards that are missing in Na Darius, this Aggro Noxus package as well as the Burn package is stuff that we've taken out of this deck. While I think Rearguard, Saboteur, and Grenadier can work, and like a way to beat Azir Aurelia is by going aggro, right? Like that's what this is trying to be a mixture of aggro and like this weird control shell just to make them have like powerful tempo plays with like Drop the Bomb on a Domination basically blows them out of the water, right? Group Shot on Duo basically blows them out of the water, right? That was the theory. But to do that, we have to cut these sorts of cards. Now, I think you could also make this deck beat Azir Aurelia with these sorts of cards, but this makes it slightly more comfortable in my experience. But if you're fighting, if you wanted to play this on ladder for some reason, make sure you're running your rear guards, your saboteurs, your grenadiers. Decimate I took out for very similar reasons. I don't really want to brick myself with Decimate when I could have other options. The way this deck wins typically is via striking them a few times and just like doing like 3 or 4 damage every single turn by open attacking. That's typically the way this deck tries to win, and then you just like stall out and survive. And by dealing with all their stuff, they can't really do too much against you, right? So you just slowly like... It's sort of like Broadmean where you attrition them, except instead of Broadmean, because Broadmean is too expensive to fight Azir Aurelia with, you're running a bunch of cheap stuff. You've got Decimate and Fervor being cut for that reason. Fervor was something that was interesting. You can include Fervor to try and beat Aurelia, especially if Aurelia's leveled. And it also gets through Aurelia if they've got like Shapestone. But that's not any better than having Pokey Stick, Drop the Bomb, blah, 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 blah. And again, we're not really trying to use this on the face. We are trying to like control their main win conditions, which are these cards. And then move on from there. The last card that you might have expected in a list like this is Buster Shot. Buster Shot being 2 mana, dealing 3. It's better than like Drop the Bomb and Bouncing Bomb in that sense, but every single one of their powerful units has 2 HP except Azir. So the risk of not having procced your Buster Shot is pretty bad. And what I found was that you actually didn't reliably proc Buster Shot without changing the deck a lot. You need to get a Pigeon or else you don't actually have a Noxus card. Now, I could have added more Noxus cards. I could have replaced a Beard for Saboteur or whatever, but you need a Noxus card. You'll have Vandal City, but then you need to find Ionia and PNZ. It was just unlikely, and I think Buster Shot, while a good addition to this deck in general, again, if you're wanting to like take lists from CDS and bring them to ladder, I do recommend running Buster Shot and like the aggressive package and taking out some of this other stuff, like all of these like random spells so that you can add more aggressive things, but this wasn't what this was. This was me trying to beat Azir earlier as comfortably as possible, and that included trying to kill their stuff like Domination and Greenblade Duo with all of these cards. Next was Gwenalawi. Gwenalawi is a deck that I really, really enjoyed. It's my favorite deck that I've drafted from CDS, and I think it's so much fun. This is particularly teched, again, against Azir Aurelia. If we go back to the Sparring Shooting Greenblade Duo Domination package, we've got 2 Parley, 3 Quietus, 1 Make It Rain, 2 Vile Feast. Right? All of these cards are there to try and beat Sparring Student, Greenblade Duo, and Domination. Quietus is very good against Domination. It gets you up 2 mana in a deck that really wants to play aggressively with the stuff like Redeemed Prodigy and Mirai Warden. Like, you get to run 6 Mirai Wardens as well as like 9 1-drops. It's a very aggressive deck that just plays for these sorts of tempo plays. I wanted to do a quick aside about tempo here. Before CDS, I wasn't much of a deck builder. I'm still not really a deck builder, but this is really helping me practice deck building skills. But having played a lot of decks before, not a lot of decks, but having played decks a bit in the game before prior, I had this, the way I explained tempo in my own head was based on the way in which you evaluate the cards in your hand in terms of getting the most pressure or damage or surprise value that you can possibly get, right? So my experience with tempo decks is stuff like Zoya Felios, Winding Light, Red Gwen, arguably Sivir Akshan with the Akshan landmark, like these sorts of decks. They play for these high tempo plays, and all of the cards in your deck are trying to play for a tempo win condition, right? So Gwen can apply a lot of tempo, but more importantly, like both of the Reckoners do a lot of tempo, right? Like you're trying to find specific spots where this one card that costs 4 or 5 mana gets so much more worth of value just because you've found that one specific scenario where you can get a massive tempo spike with that card. Now, tempo spikes are easy to access with other cards, right? Like Feel the Rush can give you a tempo spike, and it doesn't really matter what scenario in, it will give you that tempo spike, right? But what makes tempo cards so interesting, such as the Reckoners from Red Gwen and why I like that deck so much, is that they're not universally good in every situation, but you have to seek out situations that make those cards good. Anyway, that's how I've always viewed it without considering the deck building. Now trying to deck build, I see the way that tempo decks are constructed. They're constructed with a combination of good, powerful units, or units that can do powerful things, combined with cheap, conditional spells that can find lots of values in certain situations. Now, this isn't inherently true, right? You can make tempo decks with just like every single most powerful thing, and you're going to be gaining like a static amount of tempo every single turn based on the inherent value of the card. But what makes tempo decks really interesting is trying to get an excess amount of value by playing the cards in synergy with one another to get certain things to occur. My point in saying this was that by turn 6, the way this deck will play out is you'll probably have something like a Mirai Warden, a Prodigy, and maybe a 1-drop, but you'll also have played Quietus and Parley, and that sort of type of tempo against Azir Aurelia can work wonders. And having Domination be lost by Quietus, meaning that you can get a free Mirai Warden out, is quite powerful. Now, I don't have much other card game experience except a little bit of Plants vs. Zombies Heroes before LOR, so the way I've described tempo might like make some Magic players cringe. These are my thoughts. My thoughts are temporal. This is a snapshot of what I'm thinking at the time. The question of like what is tempo is one of like the most well-known like confusing questions to answer. But this is the way that I've organized it in my head. There's different ways of viewing tempo from a deck building perspective and a gameplay perspective. But seeing it from the deck building perspective, I can really see the way that you've just got a bunch of, you know, minor cards that do certain things, but when you combine them together, you can find these really interesting, like 2 or 3 card massive play patterns that do insane things. And you will see this happen in one of the games. Then there's 2 other cards that are important for beating Gwenalawi. Despair is a perfect anti-tech for Azir. Just 1 Despair is for Azir. And Shakedown is pretty good at killing Aurelia, if and only if it's not dying to this other stuff. Now, if you're pressuring enough, they'll block with Azir, and you can kill Azir with Quietus, right? Like, most of your stuff has 2 strength, except, like, stuff you can get off the Mirai Warden. So very typically, if they block with Azir, it's now in Quietus reach. And also, if you really want, you can do, like, a Make It Rain Parley to kill Aurelia. You can do Vile Feast Parley to kill Aurelia. Like, Aurelia can die. Now, this is a deck that I've been really, really enjoying, this Gwynalawi deck. But this is very different to the first version of Gwynalawi, and I wanted to show a couple of cards that I took out of this. The first is Glimpse Beyond. You might see like a weird aggro SI deck that has a lot of like Death Rattle synergy with all the Hollowed stuff. That they would want Glimpse Beyond, right? It's an amazing draw tool if they try and interact with your stuff. You Glimpse Beyond, get a bunch of value, right? Like, Glimpse Beyond is great for when they Vengeance something, you Glimpse Beyond, you've converted their 6 mana into your drawing too. It's absolutely beautiful. But against the Zeralia, they don't interact with your stuff. Your stuff doesn't get interacted with, so Glimpse Beyond actually doesn't do anything. And Glimpse Beyond, in comparison to Eye of Nagakeboras, is just so much worse in this deck, specifically against these matchups. And what I really like about the CDS format is you can look at cards like Glimpse Beyond that are so prototypically insanely good and realize that Glimpse Beyond doesn't do anything against a Zeralia, right? Glimpse Beyond doesn't accomplish anything more than Quietus accomplishes something to kill Domination, Parley accomplishes killing Duo and the Aspiring Student, more than Redeemed Prodigy, Doom Beast, or Mirai Warden in applying pressure. Right? Like, Glimpse Beyond doesn't accomplish what you want it to. You can safety block something like an Azir, but that's not going to be any better than playing Eye of Nagakeboras at that point in the game. And it's not going to be better than pretty much any other card, because you also want to be applying pressure after that attack. The other thing that I took out of this was the Tentacle package. Typically, when I was playing this earlier, I would run 3 Cease Voice, 3 Idle, and 1 Tentacle Smash. The Alawi part of this deck, I know I've cut the champions out, I just wanted to make this graphic look a bit easier to look at. The Tentacle package was actually pretty good in a deck like this. And being able to put your Hollowed on an Overwhelmed Seize Voiced Tentacle, and then also have that Hollowed go onto your Alawi, because the Alawi takes the strength of your Tentacle, right? So your Tentacle is like a 4/4 that gets +3 strength from Hollowed, and then your Alawi has 10 strength Overwhelm, right? Like, this sort of play pattern happens pretty often. All you need is a Sea Voice, a little bit of Hollowed, and like Alawi, and then boom, you've got these 2 massive Overwhelm hitters, while also having your go wide strategy, and while also having interaction pieces such as Shakedown. Worked really well. But unfortunately, against a deck like Azir earlier, you don't really want these large tentacles. While Tentacle can block stuff, it's almost too slow compared to stuff like your Mirai Wardens. Now, Watchful Idol isn't bad, but I'd rather have a 2-strength attacker on turn 1. That's why we've got extra Shell Shockers here, because that sort of attack ends up being like 4 or 6 damage over the course of the game. Even if it gets blocked by something, it's killing something that like Mirai would have blocked Mirai Warden later, right? So having these early, like, 2-strength units to trade into their stuff or to attack was quite important for the way that I wanted this deck to play out against Azir earlier, where I wanted it to be aggressive, but also have, like, certain tools to deal with their main power options, right? Like, if you can slow, in quotes, Azir earlier down by killing their 1 HP units in Domination, you just sort of go through powerfully. But that's why I took out the Tentacle package. It didn't really make any sense against the way that I wanted to play against Azir earlier this week. The last deck is Fiora Shen. Fiora Shen, I think, is really good at beating Azir earlier because of the little Fiora card. But importantly, I actually had 8 Fioras. I had 3 Fioras, 2 River Shapers, and 3 CC Feyfolks. And this deck was all in on Fiora, River Shaper, or Feyfolk. You draw 1, you keep it alive with Tough, or you keep it alive with something else, and then you just win, right? You've got the Dark and Aegis on Fiora, River Shaper, Feyfolk, you've got Durant Protege, you've got Ranger's Resolve, just in case you need a block wide. Ranger's Resolve is also important for something else I'll mention later on. Allure was really good as a one-of in this deck when you're going all in on Fiora, and I think Allure will surprise you on how good it was. Adding +1/+1 to a Fiora, a River Shaper, or a Feyfolk is honestly good enough if you're all in on that combo, right? It sounds weird that like 2 mana +1/+1 on a combo piece I'm saying is like a really good thing, but it'll surprise you that like the way in which all of these decks play out, they're trying to do these 1-strength, maybe 2-strength attacks, and having that 1 extra HP just means it can block 1 extra thing. It allows it to stay alive that little bit longer, and all you need for all of these cards is to stay alive for 1 instance longer and get your strike value, right? And Allure accomplishes that. But what Allure does better as well is giving you that keyword. Fearsome is insane against Azir earlier. Elusive will allow you to push alternate win conditions or attack with your Feyfolk or your River Shaper through their stuff. Quick Attack is just phenomenal. Quick Attack means they can't block, they can't kill your stuff at all. Even Regeneration works pretty well in all of these. That's 4 keywords out of 10. Overwhelm will probably do you fine, allows you to pressure win condition if you don't have that Fiora in line. I don't know what else you really need. I think Allure, just as a one-up, you don't, drawing 2 of them would be absolutely awful, and you don't even want it in half of your games, but in the instances where you've got Allure on 3, Fiora on 4, and then you can play either a Darken Aegis or keep up Syncopation to beat stuff like the recalls. It's just a beautiful gameplay pattern, and Allure really surprised me in how good it was. There were so many games that were decided because Allure gave that +1/+1 pre-committally, and these regions don't really have permanent buffs outside of weapons, so this worked quite well to have that Allure, to just give that extra stat to that Fey Folk or that River Shaper. These are the only cards that Fiora ever needs to be scared about, Homecoming and Defiant Dance, and so we've got a bunch of answers to these. The first thing I did when I made this deck was add 3 denies to beat Defiant Dance with. Syncopation's probably a little bit better, but it does require you to have other units. You need to be playing around having those other units, and if they're applying pressure and you're not using a Fiora game plan but a River Shaper game plan, Syncopation might not be the best. And also single and concerted kills Homecoming, and importantly, this allows you to present lethals with Fiora. With this deck, I would just full mulligan for Fiora, unless I had a really, amazing hand with, a Fey Folk and an Aegis and a single and, I don't know, a Broadwing or something. I should mention, this Challenger package is also pretty important to make sure you're not dying to Sparring Shoot and then Duo. That's the only other thing I really would want to mention here. And Vestayan Disciple did come in handy as a one of just drawing stuff. What are some cards that are missing in Fiora Shen? Literally the entire barrier package. There's no reason to run barriers against a deck that kills you with 1,000 cuts. That's just not a necessary win condition. And fundamentally, this isn't Fiora Shen. This isn't that sort of, fair, in quotes, mid-range that tries to play for the board, win through the board. This is a degenerate combo deck with 8 win conditions, and then every other card is supporting those win conditions and trying to stay alive on your Nexus with all the Challenger stuff, or keep those 8 win conditions alive with Sharp Sight, Single, Catch, Concerted, Deny, Twin, Allure, etc. Right? That's what this deck was. So all of these cards are not in it for certain reasons. You don't need the barrier package. Same goes for Screeching Dragon and Scattered Pod, right? These typical, mid-range, good Demacia and Ionia cards that play for this sort of game plan aren't in that deck for that reason. Now, and I'm going to show you the Azir deck list now. Spidz, what if they don't bring Azir? You've talked so much about trying to beat Azir. What happens if they don't bring Azir? Nearly everything I have just said applies to MF Swain. Pretty much everything, right? The idea of the Nardarius deck using Drop the Bomb, Pokey Stick, Grip Shot, kills all of these units, and you'll have noticed Disintegrate and Flock. Those can kill Azir, but they're also there for Swain and Levy. That Aloof Traveler is also there for Swain, Levy, Decimate. To be honest, it's there also for Defiant Dance. If I want to stick a Darius, I want to make sure it's not getting recalled. So Aloof is there for that reason as well. But it's also here to kill the Swain, kill the Levy, kill the Decimate. Right? The Fey units that create the Owlcats are here to block these just as much as they are to pressure the other deck, right? That card has 2 purposes, blocking these and dealing damage to this stuff. Gwenalawi is also pretty good against this deck. If you ever did Red Gwen versus Pirates, this is that exact same matchup where you stabilize the board. They have no way of killing Gwen because they're not running Flock, so you never block with Gwen. You just heal 2 every time with Gwen. They're forced to block Gwen because Gwen has 5 strength every time she attacks for some reason. And you just trade down everything. Those Vile Feasts, Make It Rains, and Quietus hits this deck just as much. And going wide with Mirai Wardens blocks this stuff perfectly. Fiora Shen, very similar thing. You go all in on your Fiora, you go all in on your Fey Folk. Now, to beat that, they can do a Swain Levy lockdown. That's why we have that one Concerted Strike, and that's why we also have stuff like Allure and some of those Challenger cards to actually apply just a little bit of a mid-range game plan if they know that they need to go Swain Levy. And if we're pressuring with Fiora to the point where they don't want to develop units, we need to make sure that we've got that slightly alternate win condition to get them down to maybe 5 or so HP, so that even if they do get the Swain Levy, we can still push through a lethal somehow. Now, Swain Levy is a good way of dealing with the Fiora Shen, and when I was scrimming with Eniamar, when we started, I would just blow him out of the water, but as time went on, he realized that his only win condition really was Swain Levy. And so this matchup became a lot worse during that instance. Gwenalawi into... Also, the Azir Aurelia matchups also got worse the more we scrimmed. And it got worse because the more we scrimmed, the more we realized that you're never going to keep Domination, Duo, and Sparring Student. You're only ever going to keep Azir and Aurelia and Darius. Every other card is useless. But this is something you gain from scrimming a lot, like having a bunch of experience with decks. And so... fundamentally, I think still having these silver bullety cards for those powerful cards is important, just in case they redraw into them. But in their mulligan, the more they realize how this matchup should work, the less they're going to be keeping those dominations and stuff. It's the same with this matchup. The less they're going to keep their Butchers and Saboteurs, and the more they're going to go for Swain and Leviathans. The last deck was Ash LeBlanc. We don't need to look at too much. This is what's getting banned. I was trying to beat the other 2. Let's go. I'll let you guys watch the montage, and then we'll do a VOD review. So, as we predicted, they were going to bring Azir Aurelia, Ashe LeBlanc, and MF Swain. I think that was pretty likely. It's what they brought last week, and it didn't seem like they were going to switch up it. So, we got pretty lucky that we practiced exactly for this. Like, this is exactly what we wanted. They take a while, but decide to ban Fiora Shen. Pretty understandable. I think they must have a lot of experience in Azir Aurelia and knew that Fiora just absolutely dominates Azir Aurelia, so we had to end up playing these two decks. And we started with Nar Darius. Now, going into the first match, we had this as our opening hand. From memory, I haven't even edited the thing yet, so I don't remember what I keep. But from memory, I keep Group Shot and Concho. I think maybe Concho was a bad keep, but I think Group Shot's really important to kill those cards that I was mentioning earlier. No, yeah, so I kept the Concho. I think keeping Concho... Look, it's okay if I can get stuff that Concho does to beat, you know, certain cards, like getting a drop the bomb to kill a thing is fine. I think I would have maybe preferred to have a one drop just to apply a little bit of pressure, but that's okay. In the end, we did get Beard, and I decided to open with Beard. I wanted them not to develop something like a Broccoli when I play my thing, and more importantly, I didn't want them to play something like a Sparring Student, right? If I play Concho, I get to do 4 damage in, but their Sparring Student gets to get bigger and bigger and bigger. Because they'll develop a unit at unit speed, and then I won't be able to kill their Sparring Student. So if they do something like Sparring Student, Azir, I'm all of a sudden starting to have to block Sparring Students that I wasn't going to block otherwise. So I didn't want to play Concho, I wanted to keep up Group Shot so that I can kill a Sparring Student if they were to play it. Now if they played Duo, it wouldn't have mattered too much because I could shoot Duo next turn, and if they have that Twin or Shapestone, they're always going to have those 4 cards to beat my removal spells. I just want to have more removal spells than those 4 cards, if that makes sense. But I decided to open attack to try and beat that sort of stuff. They ended up playing Dia, so I ended up taking Pokey Stick from the Concho. And we ended up drawing another Group Shot. They play Aurelia here, and this is around the time when the first misplay occurs in this game. As you would have seen from the montage, there was a very definite, obvious misplay. This whole time I was thinking about, what's my plan against domination? Because I don't have the specific options to beat domination. I don't have my drop the bomb right now. And so my thinking was, okay, to beat domination, I can go 4 wide and then Group Shot domination. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go 4 wide and I'm going to Group Shot domination. And so that's the game plan I go for. And while these turns are pretty obvious, they do the dancing, I play my 2 units, they do some more dancing, and we move on. The reason I Group Shotted on the stack is that I was thinking too much about the domination play. Even after Aurelia was played, I was like, oh, I still got to do the domination play, when obviously Aurelia doesn't get value by being on the board, unlike domination, right? So if they had domination here, I do think this was the correct play. I think it was correct to open and do this on the stack. You could just do this and not let them do anything, but what I didn't want them to do is do like retreat return and like play a unit afterwards. I really wanted to make sure that the domination was going to die. Sorry, not the retreat return. I really wanted to I didn't want to develop like do this and then they play Azir and then they can block my stuff. I'd much rather attack, get my 6 damage in, and kill what in my head, for some reason, I was pretending this was like domination and got typical value. Domination needs to be removed immediately because if they do play Blade Dance cards, they're going to have 2 strength, and I can't justify dealing with those 2 strength things. But it was Aurelia. It wasn't domination. I don't know why I was so obsessed with trying to Group Shot this. This is the first of many misplays that occurs this game. I think this is the game I played the least well. And I'm pretty upset at myself. The reason why you don't hear my in-game audio is because the whole game, I'm upset at how I play during this round. But I do this, they block. They play that. They end up having both Azir and Aurelia over the next 2 turns. At some point, I try and consider killing Azir, but this turn becomes really interesting. Can I get to after they play Aurelia? Yeah, okay. This turn becomes really, really interesting. We've got a few options. We can actually kill Azir right now with Group Shot, Drop the Bomb, Pokey. Right, and Group Shot, Drop the Bomb, Pokey does do pretty decently. My main concern was something like a retreat return. If I commit all of those onto Azir and they have retreat return, I think I lose the game on the spot. So I was thinking, okay, I might not be able to deal with that. But the thing is, they've got so much Azir level up progress already by having the 3 attacks with the 5 attacks with Aurelia and then what they're going to do with all of this stuff. It was pretty scary for me at the moment. From memory, I decided to force them to attack with Azir so that it's easy to kill Azir. That's my memory of this. By the way, when I played second Concho, I think I missed this because I was too busy skipping through. Yeah, this is important. I should have taken Roar of the Slayer. Roar of the Slayer was something I was considering. I thought about Roar of the Slayer for a long, long time. I remember liking Lightning Rush a lot. And at this point, I wasn't entirely sure that I wanted to use my group shots on Aurelia and not on Duo or Sparring Student. If they had Duo or Sparring Student, they might have already played it though. They might have just used that opportunity to try and get their Sparring Student through. So maybe I wasn't supposed to think about dealing with Sparring Student and all that stuff. I should have taken Roar of the Slayer. Roar of the Slayer is the perfect anti-Azir tool, and I'm annoyed at myself that I didn't take Roar of the Slayer. Roar of the Slayer was such an obvious take, and this whole game I'm upset at myself for not taking Roar of the Slayer. But I just wanted to keep this in mind. I ended up taking Lightning Rush from there. Anyway. So, for example, in this position, Roar of the Slayer would have been a great start. If they do retreat return, we get to kill Aurelia anyway, because we just get to, like, pokey stick this thing and then Aurelia dies, which isn't great, but it's still 3 mana for killing their thing. We can discard one of these things that isn't that great, like like the Fae unit, or even maybe drop the bomb, to be honest. So I really wish I had taken Roar of the Slayer. I watched their VOD, I've seen what their hand is. They don't actually have anything to deal with this. Their hand is something like double Defiant Dance and 2 Blade Dance ladies. So I think I should have probably just done Roar of the Slayer, but anyway. They do this stuff. I decide not to kill it. I decide to play, well, I decide to kill Aurelia, because if they open attacked with Aurelia, I wanted to make sure the slow speed thing got Aurelia. Like, because they could open attack and then do Azir stuff afterwards. So that's why I did that. They attack. I decide to kill the 2-1 so that they're forced to attack with Azir. But even still, right, like, I can't block these things, so I want to also present lethal sort of stuff. If I wanted to, I could not respect Shapestone and decide to attack for even more and try and go for a lethal, right? I block this, I've got this much attack, I've got 3, 3, 2, 2, that's 10. I've got Lightning Rush plus Pokey Stick, they would be at 1 HP. And then we can wait for this if we want, but we'd lose to Shapestone, which I didn't really want to do at the time. But in the end, right, like, all of these trades occur, and we get their attack in and all this sort of stuff, but I don't really have the best way of dealing with this. Now, this was wrong. This group shot was wrong. I should have done Pokey Stick. The reason is that if they've got Retreat Return, I can't deal with Azir, and unfortunately, if they've also got Homecoming, I can't deal with Azir, right? If they had Homecoming, they would do it, and then I'd be able to kill this, prevent their Homecoming, and kill their Azir, and obviously, if they're Homecoming and Azir, it might mean they don't have a second Azir. In the end, they let this happen. They've got second Azir, and I sort of just lose the game from second Azir. The one issue this deck does have is against Azir himself, and when I was talking about the way that they need to play, they need to not have Domination, Sparring Student, and Duo to devalue all of these cards, and then just have Dais and 2 Azirs. And that's exactly what they had. They had Dais, 2 Azirs, they devalued all our stuff because they didn't end up keeping their Duo. I watched them, they just got rid of Duo from Mulligan. Right after the game happened, I wanted to see what their perspective was like, so I thought that was interesting. And look, I'm gonna watch this game go through. I try and do stuff. They don't play their student. I kill this thing so that they can't open with it, but they have a bunch of Blade Dance stuff. Look, none of this really matters. I try and kill Azir because I do draw the Disintegrate. If we had Roar the Slayer, that first Azir would have died. The second Azir, we wouldn't have been pressured as much, or that sort of nonsense. Azir wouldn't have leveled as quickly, so we would have taken less damage. Blah, 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 blah. Look, the main play point that happened in this game was not taking Roar the Slayer. I think that was pretty obvious. In fact, Roar the Slayer was one of the cards I was considering adding to the deck just for Azir. But Disintegrate does that better and also has play against Leviathan and Swain. The other thing is that I think while this deck did make sense against them, it only made sense if I could do those 1-for-1 trades against the Student and the Duo. And fundamentally, that's just not how this happened. Tempo knew how to play this matchup. So props to Tempo for knowing like how to not play this. I've never played Azir Aurelia, and whenever I did fight Azir Aurelia during Azir Aurelia season, I was playing Azir Darius aggro. So I've never really tried to control Azir Aurelia before. And so I think, look, I had the option of just going the Rearguard and Imperial Demolitionist and all that sort of stuff line. It's slightly worse into MF Pirates, while this is better into Misfortune Pirates. This did work a little bit, but he knew how to play this matchup, and that's why we lost. I think in future, I would have had maybe like 1 or 2 more Disintegrates, a few less group shots, and maybe something like a Stun Spider flop combo, but it didn't end up mattering. But we'll move on to game 2. In game 2, we've got Nah versus Pirates. Now, this matchup is slightly better for me, I think, and we've got a pretty decent hand, right? We've got Group Shot Battle Commander. Can I see what my mulligan was? Right, I full mulligan. Concho is something I was considering keeping. And same with Drop the Bomb, but I really wanted a 1-drop to block their 1-drop, or I wanted a Group Shot, just to stem their pressure. And, like, the entire rest of the deck are just these cards anyway. So, like, replacing them with something equal or worse is either going to have... sorry, you're not going to get anything worse than these cards, right? There are a lot of cards that are equal, and there are a few cards that are better. And that was my logic with this mulligan, right? So Concho can be replaced with any other sort of 2-drop or invoke card or removal spell. Disintegrate Mare and Drop the Bomb are the exact same sentence. Replacing any of these with a pigeon or a bird would be happy. Replacing any of these with a Pokestick would be happy. The only card that is worse than all of these is Darius. But I thought if I'm mulliganing them all away, it's rare for me to draw like 3 Darius. Even if it's 1 Darius and 3 equal cards, the chance of getting stuff like Group Shot and Pokey is worth it. Anyway. We get this mulligan, which is pretty decent, right? Like, we've got this unit. This lady is so good against Pirates because you just get so many Owlcats that you sort of just, like, beat them through. And if we can stem their early pressure, we've got the Aloof Travelers to beat their late games. Like, if we discard 2 Levies or a Levy and a Decimate or a Levy and a Swain, we're in such a good position that this mulligan ended up being really powerful. They play Butcher. We can't deal with Butcher, so we just play Bandle Commando. We play our unit. I decide to group shot this just in case they open attack. That way I'm taking 1 less damage. Now, this might have been important to kill Misfortune, you're saying, right? If you want to kill Misfortune, you need to do both of these. But Owlcat kills Misfortune because it's got the barrier. We can just block Misfortune and then disintegrate later. It's pretty much the same sense except we're taking 1 less damage. Alternatively, we're going to draw into so many different types of pings. Just dealing 2 damage to Misfortune and then pinging her is a pretty viable strategy, right? So we ping this off. They start with the 2-2. Now, you might wonder why I didn't do... Like, watching the clip, you might wonder why I didn't do Father into Owlcat so that I have a 3-strength unit to block Pigeon with. But if I play Father and they don't have a unit and they just open attack, I'm taking 1 extra damage for no reason because I'd want to be blocking the Owlcat with the blocking a 2-2 with an Owlcat. And fundamentally, if they're playing Pigeon, they've only got 2 cards left in hand. I can try and outvalue them, especially since I've got all this extra amazing draw and outvalue cards, that I'm willing to trade down just a little bit, like trade it down into their Pigeon or something, or take extra damage from their Pigeon, just to see what their hand is like, and then try and outvalue them later. So I do the Owlcat, they play Pigeon, I play Father. I do these blocks to keep Father alive, that way my Pigeons have, my Owlcats, sorry, have 3 strength, so that I can trade into stuff like, well, I won't trade into Pigeon next turn, although I can attack into Pigeon, but can trade into stuff like Misfortune and whatever. And this allows it to block in future turns. I'm taking a little bit more damage now, but they've only got 2 cards left in hand. I'm going to be able to discard their high cost cards, so this felt pretty fine. Do these blocks. We play the Owlcat and the thing. I don't play Aloof because I don't need to discard Swain or Levy just yet. I can discard them on later turns, and I needed the blockers. So having 2 Owls and the Banner Commando allows us to have these blockers. This attack is amazing for us. This attack is so good for us because we get to kill their Misfortune, get them out of Misfortune's Make It Rain. Now, if they had Misfortune's Make It Rain, that'd be pretty decent for them, but we still got, like, that outvalue game plan. Like, we've just got that, right? Misfortune's Make It Rain, like, is really bad for us. We're lucky that it would probably not hit both of these or all 3 of these. If it hit all 3 of these, it'd be quite lucky. It's more likely that it's going to hit 2 of them and then 1 of either these 2 things. So this block isn't still awful, but, like, if they've got Misfortune's Make It Rain, we can discard their stuff. We've got this, like, late game value that just, like, out deals with them, right? They end up playing real Make It Rain after they play Nakake Boros, I think. They just play Make It Rain. Oh, right, we draw them the Make It Rain when we play this. We discard a Levy, I think, from memory. Yeah, we discard a Levy and they play Make It Rain. But honestly, I don't care that they played Make It Rain here. Like, we've got 10 health. We're feeling pretty fine and we're going to be able to, like, kill them in probably 2 turns time. And we get to discard their massive stuff. So I play Pigeon. I decide to play Aloof here to try and make sure that they can't play Levy next turn. Right, if they top deck Levy or they got a second Levy, I want to discard it. We end up discarding Decimate, and we've just got, like, an insane attack. Now, I decide not to play Pigeon here. I think playing Pigeon was probably correct. I just wanted to, like, Pokestick if they wanted to, like, further block. Right, if they were planning on further blocking, I would want a Pokestick. That's the only reason I didn't do that, and I think I was going to put them on a pretty reliable lethal soon anyway, just through like meh stuff, whether I'm drawing Aloof Travelers to discard their stuff more, or I'm going to draw something like a Shark Trainer or Telescope to get me some insane value or whatever. But I was pretty sure I was going to win like relatively soon. I didn't need to be too aggressive. The extra 2 damage didn't think it would matter to me, and so I decided to attack like this. I didn't hit my own unit here. I probably should have. For some reason I thought, well, I don't want to kill this pit. I don't want to kill this Aloof Traveler and put it into Make It Rain range, so I just won't hit anything. I probably could have hit this 2-3. That would have been fine. Really no reason not to have done that, I don't think. We do that. They play Saboteur. I decided to play Mare instead of Pokestick just because I think Pokestick was super important to beat further stuff now. Off Mare, our choices are Shark Trainer, Looping Telescope, and Minion. I was going to take Shark Trainer, but I thought Looping Telescope might be better just for, like, the offshoot chance that I get, like, some sort of either Aloof from Looping Telescope or, like, a heal card from Telescope, like the Darken Fan or... I don't know, there's a few lifesteal, like Eye of the Dragon, right? Like, we had lifesteal cards to get a Looping Telescope, but I thought I may as well just go Looping Telescope here. So I play that. I play another one of these. I see Arena Mechacaster, and I'm like, oh shit, I win. And then I play my Telescope. I take Moonsilver. I don't really know why I took Moonsilver. I think Loaded Vessel was better to beat further stuff, but I play this. They just surrendered. Game's over. This was a pretty good get from the Mare. Going to the final game, we have Gwenalawi versus Pirates. With this mulligan, I really wanted a way to have early stuff to deal with their aggression. I think I should have kept Redeemed Prodigy. I misplayed by kicking Redeemed Prodigy. Redeemed Prodigy just applies so much pressure, and they don't really have X3s. They can't really block Redeemed Prodigy outside of Misfortune. And if they're blocking it with Misfortune, I've got the Vile Feast, I've got a bunch of pings that can back that up. Quietus now kills a 3-1 Misfortune as well, which is a gameplay pattern that did happen in scrims against NEMR. But for some reason, I kicked Prodigy. I ended up drawing it back, which was quite lucky, and we've got an insane aggressive hand here, alright? Like, all of these cards play for some amazing tempo plays and some amazing aggro, especially against Pirates, to the point where they were probably going to outscale me. But we get to just do like some absolutely bonkers stuff. They play Sabo, I attack, they develop Mirai Ward, and I decide to Vile Feast. I don't know if this Vile Feast was entirely correct. I think there are worlds where I could have done, like, the 2 1-drops and then done the 2-drop and the Quietus, and that would have applied more pressure. So I don't think I needed to Vile Feast. I think Vile Feast was likely wrong, because if they attack into me, I also get to put my Holid and do this trade. So I think I was better off just playing Butler. If they decide not to attack me, then it's also fine, right? Like, if I play Butler and then they decide not to attack me, I can play this thing. They might play Make It Rain. I do this, I still feel fine. So I wish I hadn't done Vile Feast there. I think it was a little bit premature. We do Make It Rain. They get the best Make It Rain they could have possibly gotten, which was a bit unfortunate. But what's good is that we do have this Shell Shocker Quietus play. Now, Shell Shocker doesn't matter because I end up not attacking Shell Shocker into the 1-1. But Quietus allows us to attack into their stuff without them trading off the Redeemed Prodigy, which is phenomenal. And this is what I was talking about earlier during the Google slides about Quietus, right? With that Quietus, it just works, right? It just happens to do what it wants to properly. So we do that. I play the Shell Shocker. I play the Shell Shocker first to try and bait them into playing, like, their 1-drop. Right, just in case they want to open attack, right? Like, I want them to play their 1-drop, because if they've got 2 1-drops here, I'm not going to Quietus the Mirai Warden anymore, because I'm not going to bother about trying to get this thing to attack in twice. But because they don't play a 1-drop here, I decide to Quietus this. Quietus only really hits these sorts of cards anyway. I don't need to keep it for, like, particular threats. It's just to stem their aggression. So the fact that I can get an extra attack in with Redeemed Prodigy is just beautiful, right? So I do the Quietus. I attack with the Redeemed Prodigy, I get the strike in, and then I just feel amazing. They do I've not get Boras, which means we get to do the exact same play again, but even better. We get to kill the 2-2, and we get to play the 2-1, and we get to open with our own I've not get Boras. From memory, their hand right now is 3 Swains and a Misfortune, or something like that. Or it's 3 Swains and a further, right? They were having an awful, awful time. But we can do the same play that we just talked about with the Quietus. With the unit, we end up playing I. And then what I notice in doing this attack is that we're 1 off lethal. Yeah, so this says 12. It's kind of hard to see, but that says 12. And they don't run any development punishes, excluding Zap Sprayfin into Make It Rain. And Make It Rain won't necessarily hit everything. So I thought, I'm going to play Redeemed Prodigy again and try and just do massive, massive tempo plays. And it works. I mean, they do have the Make It Rain, as you saw in the thing. It does hit their best targets again, right? The best targets are hit, including your Dream Prodigy, which means the Protopora can trade into it. The Patipora if they so desire. I attack like this, it's still an immense amount of damage, and we've had so much hollowed that they're forced to block the Tentacle. I think I should have put the 2/2 first to play around Alawi top decks, because as you'll notice, as you saw on the montage, they end up flocking the Tentacle, and if they flocked the Tentacle on their turn, our Alawi wouldn't have been as large. But they could only flock Tentacle because they damaged the Tentacle. So if I had put this 2/2 first, it would have prioritized them to block the 2/2 more than the Tentacle, which would have been a lot better for me if I was playing around Alawi top decks. No, I wasn't playing around Alawi top decks, but had I been playing around Alawi top decks, I should have put the 2/2 first. That's just something I would want to mention. Anyway, we do this attack. They're at 5 HP. They play Miss Fortune. They play Swain. We don't have any fearsome blockers. Swain is 6 away from leveling, but I'm not too concerned. Even if they do 6 damage plus 4 damage and they put me down to 9 HP, I've got like Alawi and Isla and Make It Rain. The chances of lethal are so high. They decide to flock this thing, which was a misplay. They really should have flocked Tentacle, and I should have started Mirai Warden so that they didn't know I had Alawi. My thinking by playing Alawi was that for some reason I thought that they might just not want to attack with Misfortune. They might be scared of Alawi plus Make It Rain. Right, so maybe they wouldn't attack with Misfortune. But that was before they played Flock, right? Because I didn't think they would be able to level up Swain. I forgot that they had Flock in the deck. Specifically Swain's Flock. They don't run Flock, they run Swain's Flock. So I think starting Isla was better. They were never going to level up Swain because Misfortune only progresses Swain by 1, so Swain will be 1 off from leveling. So I wish I played Isla first, that way they're more likely to do this. They end up doing this anyway, which is fantastic for us, but they do that, they attack in, we take the 10, you play Isla, and then we get to do what I love so much about this deck, buffing up the Tentacle, which buffs up Alawi. It just feels amazing every time that my 2/2 Tentacle has now made a 10/6 Alawi, just because we had 4 hollowed plus the spawn. Right? Or 5 hollowed plus the spawn. It just feels good. Now, they played a bunch of spells on the stack, and I got super scared. But I knew that this does 3 damage. They need to deal with 3 things in order to survive. They have Swain's Flock, as I mentioned, they had 3 flocks, and then they do Fervor and Make It Rain, and the Make It Rain misses. And that's the game. Right? Surrender. And that's it. I'm really happy with how this week turned out. It was a bet that they would bring Aziralia and Misfortune Swain. I'm sad that we lost to Aziralia because I was really happy about that matchup. That matchup felt pretty good for me, but he knew what to do. He knew to get rid of his Greenglade Duos and his 1/1s, and he didn't even draw into them. He only discarded that one in the mulligan. So he drew pretty well in that game, and he drew pretty poorly in the other games, and sometimes that's how the game goes, but I'm really happy with what I brought and the way I teched them. I thought this was a really fun week, and it's exactly what I wanted from this draft format. I'm really glad I didn't bring a bunch of, like, super meta options, right? Fiorshin hasn't seen a lot of play for ages, and while Nardarius is basically a meta deck, Gwenalawi is on no one's radar, and I think Gwenalawi is really good, and the fact that you can tech it to what matchups you like is really, really fun. This was one of my favorite weeks. The cynic might say it's because you won, Spidz, but for me it's because I put in a lot of effort regarding the techs, and it paid off. Thank you all for watching, and I shall see you next week where we're fighting. I'll double check who we're fighting. I actually don't know who we're fighting. So I'll quickly check that for you guys. I'm fighting Dale Brazil, who is Mafraju. I always want to say Mafraju, but Pinkers keeps saying Mafraju. Or Mafraju or something, so I'm gonna say Mafraju, I think. But I thought it was Mafraju. And they've got like Lurk and Nora from memory, so we're like a little fucked, but that's okay. I will see you next week. Goodbye.